Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more notable names in Jewish American history. The next individual we are looking at is, as you can see on the screen, Alan Greenspan. This is from Investopedia. Brief bio, policies, legacy. He was the 13th chair of the Federal Reserve. And served 5 terms as chair of the Fed, 87 to 2006. A good chunk of my youth. So yeah, I was born in the 80s and went to college in the early 2000s. So yeah, he's been chairman for what was a good chunk of my youth as a young man, just as an individual. So yeah, he's known for presiding over the Great Moderation and works as a private advisor through his company Greenspan Associates LLC. American economist who was chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, the Fed, the United States Central Bank, from 1987 until 2006. In that role, he also served as chairman of the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, which is the Fed's principal monetary policy making committee that makes decisions on interest rates and managing the U.S. money supply, and is best known for largely presiding over the Great Moderation, a period of relatively stable inflation and macroeconomic growth that lasted from the mid 80s to the financial crisis in 2007. So, Fed chairman over the end of Reagan's term, all through Bush 1 and Clinton and into Bush 2. Oh, quite a ways. Most of it. But anyway. Yeah. We'll just do that here with this, but we'll be able to get more information on his youth and who he was. Awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by George W. Bush, making him the only Fed chair to receive the award. And then, of course, at the end of W, economy tanks, but Greenspan is no longer over the Fed. Greenspan presided over one of the most prosperous periods in American history, thanks in no small part, supporters feel, to his helming of the Fed. Still, some of his policies and actions were controversial, either at the time or in retrospect. He, early in his career, gained a reputation for being hard on inflation, in part due to his advocacy for a return to the gold standard in monetary policy in a 1967 essay, Gold and Economic Freedom. I feel that trying to go back to gold is a foolish task, personally, because there's so many more people and there's so little of it. But that's my thoughts. Apparently, his stance on inflation was portrayed by early critics as a preference for sacrificing economic growth in exchange for preventing inflation. Greenspan eventually reversed those views as Fed chief, and in a 1998 speech conceded that the new economy might not be as susceptible to inflation as he had first thought. Now we can see where a lot of the fears of inflation come from with the economy under Carter. It hadn't been that long since that. So, yeah. So we can kind of understand why someone would be so serious on it. Let's see. In practice, his stance was actually flexible, to say the least, and he was clearly willing to risk inflation under conditions that would create a severe depression, and certainly pursued a general easy money policy relative to his predecessor, Paul Volcker. In particular, in the early 2000s, Greenspan presided over cutting interest rates to levels not seen in many decades. That kind of had an issue. He pushed for the cutting of interest rates after the dot-com bubble burst, which was early on in the 2000s. A lot of these dot-com stores and sites had popped up, and yeah, all of a sudden a lot of them went boo-doo, 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 just crash. 2001, he would do so again after 9/11 in the World Trade Center attack. And push the FOMC to immediately lower the Fed funds rate from 3.5 to 3% as it went on, and work toward lowering that rate to a record at the time low of almost 1% and holding it there for a full year. But yeah. Now let's go ahead and see what Britannica has to. Wrong one. That one. Thank you. Has to say about it. He was born March the 6th, 1926, New York City, New York, and is an American economist, and was the chairman of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve System, whose chairmanship continued through the administrations of 4 American presidents: Reagan, first George Bush, Clinton, second George Bush. At age 5, Greenspan demonstrated his proficiency in mathematics by reciting baseball batting averages and performing large calculations in his head. And as a youth, he studied at the Juilliard School and played jazz saxophone and clarinet in the Henry Jerome Band. Went on to study economics at New York University, earning a Bachelor of Arts in 1948 and a Master of Arts in 1950, and began work on a doctorate at Columbia University under economist and future Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur F. Burns. He met with the polemical novelist Ayn Rand in 1952 and became a member of her inner circle, adopting her philosophy of radical self-interest and laissez-faire capitalism. Greenspan left Columbia in 1953 and formed Townsend Greenspan and Company, an economic consulting firm in New York. After William Townsend's death in 1958, he became president and chief owner. And following Ayn Rand's urging, he served in 1967 as an advisor to Richard Nixon's 1968 presidential election campaign, and would help with Nixon's transition to the office, but refused a permanent appointment in the Nixon administration, telling the president only informally and serving on presidential task forces and commissions on advice. So, yeah. As chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors 1974 to 77, during Gerald Ford's presidency, Greenspan promoted policies that caused the rate of inflation to drop from 11 to 6.5%. 1977, Greenspan returned to his firm in New York and became an adjunct professor at New York University, getting his PhD in economics. And appointed by Reagan to fill Paul Volcker's term as chairman of the Fed, he took office on August the 11th, 1987, and during the years of his chairmanship, Greenspan became known for his decisive use of monetary policy and steering the economy between the hazards of inflation and recession. When the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell a record 508 points on October the 19th, shortly after he took charge at the Fed, he acted quickly to ensure liquidity in the markets. And when Asian countries underwent a financial crisis and an economic downturn beginning in 97, he lowered U.S. interest rates to cushion the economy. As the Asian economies recovered and the U.S. economy continued its solid expansion, he raised the interest rates in June of 1999 and also drew the public's attention to what he called unsustainable rates of growth in the U.S. economy and overextended stock prices toward the end of the 20th century. And of course, we had a number of issues like that, notably, like we said, dot-com bubble bursting in 2000. Greenspan was given a share of the credit for the longest official economic expansion in U.S. history and had an influence on global finance that was considered so extensive that the Sunday Times of London named him one of the three most powerful people in the British Isles in 1999. International recognition of Greenspan's achievements continued. In 2000, the French government awarded him the Legion of Honor. In 2002, Queen Elizabeth II named him an honorary knight of the British Empire. He would retire as the Fed chairman in January of 2006. So yeah, most of the way into Bush II's presidency. And of course, we know what happens. It tanks. In 2011, the Bipartisan Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission found that Greenspan's failure to curtail trade in securities backed by subprime mortgage loans during the U.S. housing bubble of the early 2000s and his advocacy of deregulation of the financial industry, hate fucking deregulation, had contributed to the global financial crisis of 2008. In The Map and the Territory, Risk, Human Nature, and the Future of Forecasting, Lessons Learned from the Financial Crisis, although the book mostly constituted a reassertion and contextualization of Greenspan's long-held principles, it notably allowed for a greater impact of John Maynard Keynes' animal spirits, essentially human emotion, on market behavior. But yeah. But let's go ahead and finish up and see what we can glean from Wikipedia here. So, they have his term in office as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Reagan, first Bush, Clinton, second Bush. Like I said, preceded by Paul Volcker and succeeded by Ben Bernanke. So yeah. Member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, 87 to 2006, so during his whole time there. Same with the others before and after, so, okay. And was the 10th chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, serving under Ford and replacing Herbert Stein, and he would be replaced by Charles Schultz. But born March the 6th, 1926, he is 99. No, we're past March the 6th. 26. He would be 100. Anyway, technically is a Republican, but it was during the time when Republicans half understood there's things you got to do for everybody. It can't just be about your party. Things are quite different nowadays. First married Joan Mitchell Blumenthal, 1952, and their marriage was annulled 1953. Married Andrea Mitchell in 1997, so 44 years later. And of course, like we've discussed, education was New York University, Columbia University. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, born in the Washington Heights area of New York City, his father, Herbert Greenspan, was of Romanian Jewish descent, and his mother, Rose Goldsmith, was of Hungarian Jewish descent. After his parents split, he grew up with his mother in a household of his maternal grandparents, who were born in Russia. His father worked as a stockbroker and consultant in New York City. So, yeah. Let's see what else we can find. In 1977, Greenspan obtained a PhD in economics from New York University. His dissertation is not available from the university since it was removed at Greenspan's request in 1987 when he became chair of the Fed. But in April 2008, Barron's obtained a copy and notes that it includes a discussion of soaring housing prices and their effect on consumer spending, and even anticipates a bursting housing bubble, which does happen in 2008. Interesting. So he served in many presidencies, starting with helping Nixon get into office, served under Ford, and then, like we said, he was chairman of the Fed from Reagan through the second George Bush. He plays a key role of organizing a U.S. bailout of Mexico during the 94-95 Mexican peso crisis, when the current currency had a sudden devaluation of the peso against the dollar in December of 94, and became one of the first international financial crises ignited by capital flight. Or meaning, essentially, money was going. And so it become less and less valuable. 2000, like we talked about, the dot-com bubble. Let's see, what else? Advised senior members of the W. Bush administration to depose Saddam Hussein for the sake of the oil markets. And it just ended up being one of the worst debacles there ever was. It really did. The Iraq War, the second one, just ugh. And this woman was a moron and a pain in the ass because her ideas were stupid. Again, personal beliefs, but that's how I feel about this moron, Ayn Rand. Let's see. What else we got? Anyway, As you can see, like him or not, he's clearly had an impact for being in his position for so long, 20 years, more or less, 87 to 2006. But yeah, his wife is MSNBC host. I think she's MSNBC. Andrea Mitchell. She's on. It might be ABC. I'm thinking of. I can't remember. Anyway, she's a news host on one of the bigger networks like that. He's had honorary degrees from Notre Dame, Penn, Harvard, Yale, University of Edinburgh. But yeah, books, got quite a few of them. But yeah, like I said, agree with him or not, he's clearly had an impact, even though it's clear some of the stuff he did was not good. Other stuff, yeah, it actually did fairly well. But Alan Greenspan, a name people need to just at least be aware of. Anyway, as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my sources and links in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.